Hello to our guests, speakers, family, and friends joining today. Welcome to the 2022 Black Philanthropy Month Caribbean Summit. My name is Essence Carter, Grants and Program Associate with the St. Croix Foundation for Community Development, and it is our pleasure to lead this dynamic panel. I am pleased to see so many colleagues, civic leaders, partners, and stakeholders from the diaspora that have joined. Thank you to Jacqueline Bouvier Copeland, the Wise Fund, the Akiri Group, Community Foundation of Puerto Rico, and our panelists for making this possible. St. Croix Foundation is excited to be a part of the global celebration and campaign to elevate African descent, giving, and funding equity. The theme of the event this year is Fierce Equity of Now, from Dream to Action, and that aligns so well with how the St. Croix Foundation serves. We challenge traditional philanthropy models. We assure that the least get the most and understand it is not about the size of the portfolio, but the impact on the community. Today's conversation will examine the role philanthropy has played in the Caribbean throughout history. Our keynote will address the wealth amassed through the enslavement of African people. We'll also begin to peek under the veil and have honest conversation about the relationship between colonization and philanthropy. As we look across the region, many islands like Barbados and Jamaica have started to lead discussions about decolonization throughout the Caribbean. Today, we ask, what is the path towards reconciling the past and institutionalizing equitable and just systems for the future? Now, I would like to transition to our keynote. And I have to say that Ms. François is a powerhouse with an extensive resume. She is passionate about the community and on the front lines of innovation and innovative solutions. Donna François is a Haiti program officer in the Latin America and Caribbean team of the W.K. Kellogg Foundation. She holds a family economic security portfolio to which she applies equity, community engagement, leadership, system change, and ecosystem building to support thriving children, working families, and equitable communities. Donna is responsible for identifying and nurturing positive systemic changes within communities, planning, designing, and executing program efforts to advance viable solutions for economic development, aligned with the strategic programming of the W.K. Kellogg Foundation and implementing a national and micro-regional strategy in Haiti. Additionally, she provides leadership and oversight of design and execution of the complex community-driven, multi-sector, private-public strategic partnerships, initiatives, and coalitions, with over 130 global actors who are advancing economic development, sustainable agriculture production, capital, market access, and food systems for thousands of stakeholders. For over 20 years, Donna has focused on improving economic outcomes for families through entrepreneurship and business ecosystem development in sustainable agriculture, arts, community-led food systems, coalition building, philanthropic engagement, and catalyzing capital through the lens of equity and systems. A native of Haiti, she immigrated to the United States in 2005, where she leveraged her experience to work with the University of Massachusetts President's Office, the Trotter Institute, and 19 global higher ed institutions to strengthen the Haitian national higher education system. Donna also served as a researcher for the Center of Social Policy at the University of Massachusetts Boston, where she works and advances the development of policy recommendations in support of minority families in the greater Boston area. Donna's impressive background and extensive but includes APFI Connecting Fellow, a Babson College Lewis Institute Social Innovator Leader, a network of engaged international donors board member. Donna also holds a bachelor's degree from UMass Boston and a political science degree. She also has an MBA with Babson College in entrepreneurship and social innovation. In 2017, she earned a certificate from the Emerging Leaders Program of Harvard Kennedy School. In 2020, she received 2 certificates measuring impact of sustainability and innovative finance solutions for resiliency and the SDGs of the 8 Impact Institute. Ms. François is fluent in Haitian Creole and French and possesses a working understanding of Spanish. When she isn't traveling to Haiti or Mexico, she enjoys time with her family, her dogs, vegan baking, and photography. I would like to introduce Ms. Donna François. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Essence, for such a wonderful and gracious introduction. It's such a pleasure. It's an honor for me to be here today celebrating with everyone the 11th anniversary of Black Philanthropy Month. As Dr. Copeland mentioned, we are indeed at a crossroad, but I think at a good moment in history to really think about what are the different patterns and structures and practices that philanthropy needs to think about so that we can reach the outcomes that we're all striving for and that communities requires, particularly our Black communities across the world, and particularly in the Caribbean, requires to be able to tackle deep systemic issues that are long overdue. With that, I would like to take us back a bit. Next slide, please. Thank you. I would like to take us back a bit to conversations that I'm sure many of you here in the room have either been part of or have led yourself around really thinking about patterns and root causes that seem to be permeating the broader development field, philanthropy as a sector, and also that seem to undermine very systematically and strategically efforts of local organizations, communities, throughout the world, particularly Black-led efforts, and in our context, in the Caribbean. So with that, I think it's important for us to really think about what are some of the things that we must do differently and we must consider so that philanthropy can live up to its ethos of really reaching the goal of serving and alleviating suffering, and this at a systemic level. So with that in mind, it's interesting to see that much of the criticisms, and particularly that received more light after the murder of George Floyd, are not new. These are criticism and concerns that have been voiced for quite some time. And it was quite interesting for those of you who are following to read the statements recently of General Secretary Luis Almagro of the OAS, essentially admitting and talking about the failure of international intervention in the case of Haiti. So we are at a moment in time where we need to take a hard look at these issues and think about what are some of the strategies that have already been elevated, and that's the beauty of this work, that have already been elevated by local communities and Black leaders to understand what must be done differently so that philanthropy can reach its goal and support communities and dismantling systems of inequity. Next slide, please. So with that, before we can look into the future, it's incredibly important to, one, have a sense as to why these patterns are so consistent across Black communities within the Caribbean, across the world. Why do they last for so long? And what is the shared history? Why do we even have a broad sector of development? Why is there a global north? Why is there a global south? It's very important to take time to really think about this. And the shared history that our communities share is the legacies of colonization and slavery. And And when we think about what colonization is, I think it sheds light as to why the challenges that our communities are facing are what they are today, the responsibility for philanthropy, and the ways in which these dynamics play within philanthropy, within finance, within geopolitical geopolitics, and other systems that you can think of, justice and so forth. So with that, what is colonization? Colonization is essentially the policy or practice of acquiring full or partial political control of another country, occupying it with settlers, and exploiting it economically. So, European colonization, which started around the Age of Discovery in the 1400s, was strictly economically driven. It was in service of European expansion. It was in service of the development of capitalism and industrialized nation at the time. And as a result, and it's important to also mention and keep in mind the broader doctrine of discovery, which was deeply connected to the church at the time and served as a basis for justifying expansion and control and Europe going and colonizing countries throughout the world. So the first wave of colonization was within the Americas in the 1400s, particularly 1492, when the Spaniards arrived to Haiti and occupied the island in its totality from 1492 until about 1697. And with the Treaty of Ryswick in 1697, Spain essentially ceded the west part of the island to France, essentially leading to modern day Haiti and the Dominican Republic. So during this time, there are a number of patterns that one must keep in mind in terms of the effects and structure of colonization. One of the things that we know is that when in this case, France, Spain, Great Britain invaded those islands and communities, we see two different patterns. There's a type of colonization called settler colonization and another type called extractive. In effect, both are extractive, but the difference was that those that are considered to be settler colonial sites tended to see more infrastructure, more more investment from that standpoint from the part of the larger colony. Great Britain was an example of that kind of colonization, and there were harsher extractive type of colonies. France, as an example, was France, Belgium, were examples of that type of colony. And Haiti actually was considered by many historians to be one of the most violent, if not the most brutal and violent type of colonization that was ever seen in the world. And Haiti was also, in fact, the most promising and the most profitable as a result of that severe and brutal extraction through the murder of originally indigenous populations and then African people who were brought over through the transatlantic slave, was in fact the deemed to be one of the most violent form of colonization. So the patterns that we saw at during this expansion, we now see today. We see, as an example, evidence of weakened institution. We see evidence of dependency relationship between quote unquote former colonial or existing territories across the Caribbean with former colonial powers, or now called, as an example, global South countries. We see similarly extractive patterns. As an example, even though Caribbean islands, Haiti included, have incredibly great climate, natural resources, and technically can produce for themselves, over 80 and 90% of food, as an example, is presently imported, because there is a dynamic, and we'll get into conversations around trade liberalization and the ways in which the IMF and later on American imperialism around the 1990s really helped shape and reinforce structures through which Caribbean islands and other post-colonial societies throughout the world continue to depend for basic commodities from those countries. Next slide, please. So So as we think about this background and this context, so colonization, particularly in the case of Haiti, first with Spain and then with France, started to unravel around late 1700s, particularly 1751. So everywhere we've seen colonization across the Caribbean island, across the world, and again to refer back to Dr. Copen, Black philanthropy has historically galvanized and supported those movements, knowing that also Black philanthropy is expressed in a various of ways. So we've seen the unraveling the over time of this particular of France's grip on Haiti, and it started with in 1751. The first kind of notable maroon effort that then gradually increased to essentially what's considered the years of the Haitian Revolutionary War between 1789 and 1803. It's also worth mentioning that around the time in 1791, there was a decisive moment in that history where Boukman, who's actually a Jamaican born, who was then imported into Haiti, slave, was the voodoo priest who led the spiritual kind of blessing of the start of the Revolutionary War, and also led the planning and strategizing around those efforts. So this would then lead to 1803, when Haiti is the first country who's ever defeated Emperor Napoleon Bonaparte, and then Haiti declared itself as the first Black republic in 1804. So it's interesting to think about this in the context of, I'm sure that many of you have heard of Haiti being called the poorest country of the Western Hemisphere, but I think it's interesting to think about how the country that was the first Black republic and who then become the second democracy in this Western Hemisphere, in a matter of a couple of hundred years, would be known with this kind of appellation. Well, the story didn't end in 1804. Unfortunately, as you can imagine, immediately after 1804 to about 1820, Haiti was faced with a lot of challenges, internal challenges, having to reconcile the island, keeping in mind that the island was essentially deeply destroyed because of the war, but also because Haiti particularly was only structured to be in service of France. And as a result, we see a drastic exploitation that then led to a number of things that we would see over the next few years. So moving forward from 1825, then first reparations, in fact, to France that Haiti paid, estimated at about $20 billion, then leads us to 1915, when the United States, in the meantime, under the doctrine of Monroe, started expanding quite a bit and kind of picked up where France and those other former older colonial powers left off, and then invaded Haiti in 1915. At the time, Haiti's coffers also was ransacked for the second time by the Marines at the time, which is an estimated $13 billion that now became, I believe, Citibank, and those funds have never been repaid. So this is a background to really give you a sense as to the pattern. And from 1950s to about 2007, there's been repeated intervention in Haiti throughout time, particularly with the United States. So we now see that the world, next slide, please. Thank you. So we now see that these countries that used to be former colonial powers are today the strongest and most powerful countries. So nothing has changed in terms of that balance of power. And those particular patterns permeate all aspects of the relationships, whether it's around development, philanthropy, finance, justice, geopolitical issues, and so forth. Next slide, please. And we see a deep dependency relationship that, as I was mentioned earlier, is symbolized by high-income countries, former colonial powers, really having a relationship through which, as an example, in the 1990s, Haiti and other countries across Latin America became importer countries of, as an example, rice producers in the United States, in other places. So there's a continuous feed that exists between those two kind of block of countries, and we see the patterns present today. Next slide, please. And philanthropy follows similar patterns. So the same countries that were old colonial powers still also having built their wealth on that past history, and the continued expansion of capitalism also see this wealth being concentrated, power at the geopolitical level still being concentrated, and also by virtue of that and having access to the assets and resources also being where philanthropic dollars is mostly concentrated. So there's a need and important it's incredibly important to think about the ways in which these patterns frame interaction and frame also this kind of lack of investment or disinvestment in Black liberation efforts or in communities, as we've heard over the last 2 years in terms of the criticism that I mentioned earlier. Next slide, please. And as we think about those pieces, I wanted to leave you with, and Dr. Copeland started with quite a bit of recommendations, and I would love to hear more from yours in terms of the work that you're doing. But I wanted to leave you with a number of things that, based on the evidence, but particularly based on the direction that we're being given by communities on the ground, by local experts who are most proximate to the issues, there are a number of critical things that can be done and needs to be done so that philanthropy can truly be an ally to Black communities across the Caribbean, and so that those communities can face the big challenges that they're dealing with right now, such as climate change, and now the impact of the war on Ukraine, on food insecurity, inflation, and what have you. Three particular ones that I would like to highlight. One, it's incredibly important to think about how you're not only funding systems change, but you're also funding the institutions that, again, keeping in mind that post-colonial societies have systematically been disinvested in. So there's a need to think about how do you build institutions, how do you support local leadership, and how do you also do it in a way that undermines systems of inequity. The second piece is philanthropy has a unique role and unique capacity to play a catalyst role, whether it's around de-risking funding, in attracting impact investment, whether it's around brokering relationships, helping to fund environment, ecosystem building, helping to strengthen geopolitical relations. Philanthropy can play a particular role, particularly giving it its ethos, and I think it's incredibly important to think about how do we do that to then allow different sectors to bridge the gap and channel resources at the levels required to support communities in tackling issues in our Black diaspora and post-colonial societies in the Caribbean. And lastly, I think it's really important that we continue to have those spaces and have those kind of conversations, because the issues are vast, but the solutions are there. And many of us all hold pieces of those solutions based on our partnerships, our work, and what we've learned, and giving the urgency of now to fund and once and for all address systems of inequities. I think it's incredibly important that we continue to exchange, to partner, even at the funder level, as folks in philanthropy, and particularly as Black people leaving those spaces, so that we can be the true allies that communities require and deserve, and hopefully we can do away with those legacies once and for all. Thank you so much. It's an honor and pleasure, and I look forward to your questions and comments in our conversation in just a bit. Thank you.